So we have an obsidian blade made by a flint knapper. I didn't make it, of course. That's an oak handle, or oak would-be handle. It's burned because I cut it from another piece of oak wood using fire. See, it makes a handle. That comes from a piece of obsidian, which is volcanic glass, like that little piece or this big one. So basically put a flint knapper strikes that piece and breaks off smaller pieces, which can then be formed into the blade that you see there. So we're going to make a handle for it today. By the way, I'm wearing all Neolithic clothing, and you see that I have Neolithic body paints. Now notice how the rocks are almost useless against the wood. Not only is that hardwood, but just in general they don't work well. What we need is fire. Fire burns the wood and makes it much easier to break off the unnecessary pieces. So let's start up a little candle because we're inside of the house, and let's burn this thing. Speeding this up with time lapse, we can see how the fire actually helps us carve the wood. It's relatively easy to burn. I usually do it outside with a larger fire, which is quicker, but it was really cold, so I ended up doing it inside. Once the fire has burned the wood, which you can work with even while it's burning, you can easily carve it with tools. So watch this. See how it comes right off? Scrape it with a sharp piece of obsidian, then grind it down with a flat piece of rock. I'm starting to cut now a groove, the groove that the blade will slide into. This will take a very, very long time. This is where a hand axe is handy, pun intended, of course. I could have actually taken a blade like the obsidian blade, and I could have probably sawed through this wood using fire to weaken it in maybe 10 minutes. But that could have damaged the blade, and I didn't have a second one, so I ended up having to use the long way, which takes almost 3 hours of slowly cutting my way through this piece of wood. It's very difficult. I could have done this with a modern day saw in 30 seconds, but that wouldn't be very Neolithic, would it? Now I have lots of stone tools, and they're really just different rocks of different shapes and sizes. You'll see flint and several sedimentary rocks. That big wide one that I keep using is, I believe it's a form of shale. That one right there is a form of shale. And then of course I have pieces of quartz that I use, the one I keep sawing with, to slowly cut my way through. Now I removed probably 2 hours of time from this time lapse that you'll see randomly as clips go in and out, simply because it just took forever. I went through a bunch of candles too, so if you look closely you'll see the candle slightly changes. And there we go. We've gone a little further. You see the flames now going through the actual wood, cutting a hole through it slowly. I hold a piece of leather in my hand as I hammer away because I'm trying not to hurt my hand or hurt the wood. I'm trying to see if I can fit that blade in there, but still not good enough, so I bang away. This takes a long time if you don't have a nice piece of obsidian. By the way, the reason that I keep putting rocks inside of the groove and then putting it over the fire is I'm trying to direct the flames in a particular direction without burning too much of the outside part of the wood. You might notice that I just put spit right on the wood. This prevents the outside from burning as fast as the inside, which doesn't have spit. It's a little, icky, but the Neolithic's a pretty icky time. Spit is a perfectly useful tool. You might have just seen that I used a shell. Shells are pretty useful for slicing and cutting through wood. They actually hold up better than you might think as long as you're careful with the way you use them. Piece by piece, I'm making this groove wider. It's still not quite enough. Now at this point I think almost probably 2 hours have gone by. This is a maddeningly time-consuming process. Now I keep hammering pieces of wood into the actual cut so that I can break it apart so that I can get wooden tools in there to work. And I keep checking to see if that blade will fit. Next time I do a blade like this, I'll probably use a second obsidian blade that I can use to very quickly cut my way through this. You may have wondered why I chose oak, as it's absurdly hard to cut through. The reason I did was because it holds up very well to flame. Pine and cedar would have been much easier to cut my way through, but at the same time, they would have burned much more quickly. Oak can really take the hit. Look at the flame that I'm using on that wood. It can only take but so much of that. Look in the description for the Otzi Iceman dagger. He was a man who died in the early Copper Age, shot in the back by an arrow. That will show you how accurate my blade is. So now we're just about ready to sand this down. So let's clean everything out. Now I'm going to get leather, and I'm going to put sand on the wood, and I'm going to rub the leather against it. See, let me put the dagger on, put the blade in. You see it looks like it's just about done. And I'm going to smooth this thing down. So we're just about at that stage. Hammer it out one more time. Get that blade in there. Does it look like it'll fit? Yes. Okay, time to smooth it down. So here we are with sand. Look at that. I put sand on, rub it with leather. It actually works like sandpaper. It's basically prehistoric sandpaper. So anyhow, look at that. And it becomes very smooth very fast. It's actually quicker than normal sandpaper, but a little less precise. And it's annoyingly difficult because you have to keep putting the sand on. So now that we have a good smooth finish, and I have it all out, I'm going to wrap leather around that blade and shove it into the actual handle. I'm cutting out some leather. I actually used the knife that I just made to cut the leather. And I'm going to wrap that leather around the blade, right where it joins to the wood, very tightly. Then I'm going to secure it with sinew, deer sinew. And I'm going to pull it really tightly. I actually cut myself in the scene at one point. You don't see it because I'm moving really fast, but as you can see, I'm tightening it up. Tighten, 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 tighten. Look how much sinew. And now I'm going to get up nice and close. I've licked the sinew, by the way, so it's nice and wet. And I'm also adding some oil. You can get oil in prehistoric times. Just crush up some walnuts. So add a little bit of oil around the outside when using prehistoric paper towels. Okay, I screwed up there. But as you can see, I was thinking about carving. I decided not to. I might carve it later. But it's a nice knife. It looks nice. It feels nice. And it's really sturdy. And best of all, you could gut the predator with that thing. It's amazingly sharp. A knife like this would be used 5,000 to 7,000 years ago in Western Europe. By my ancestors, in fact. They are quite common, and many have been found at dig sites. Here's a nice image of it. And then finally, I have my reconstructed Neolithic woman walking around brandishing the dagger because she likes to brandish daggers. So anyhow, this has been Tom from anti-proton.com, and thank you for watching.